everybody, and happy St. Patrick's Day and Cade Mafalta, which is Irish for 100,000 welcomes. You're watching Techstrong Day. Hey folks, welcome back. I'm Mike Bizarre. Today we're going to be talking about, open source AI coding tools are on the horizon. Then we're going to have a chat about OpenStack is moving over to the Linux consortium. And then finally, we're going to talk about, what's going on with the Irish and technology, because the president seems to be having an issue. I want to introduce our guest today, starting with Tracy Ragan, who's joining us once again from New Mexico. Tracy, how you doing?
I'm doing great on a St. Patrick's Day. After all, with a name like Tracy Ragan, I should be doing great on a St. Patrick's Day. And you know what? Do you know what Tracy means? It means in Celtic, it means brave defender. I always like that.
All right, brave defender of open source. Okay, I can go with that. We shall see. Sulgana. Well, we like to say on St. Patrick's Day, everybody is Irish, but welcome to the show. How you doing in Ohio?
Thank you. Good to be on the show, Mike.
All right. And Guy for the day, Currier, how are you? Good to see you once again, my friend.
Thank you. Good to be here again on St. Patrick's Day. All I've got for you is the usual green wallpaper, which you can see back here. So sorry about that, but I left my green undershirt at home.
No worries. I can represent for everybody. But let's get started with what's happening with the Eclipse Foundation. They have launched a project, and it may take a few months yet before we actually see the actual IDEs that they're going to build, but they're saying that they're going to deliver open source IDEs that come embedded with AI coding agents. And what they're trying to do is have something that feels like a DeepSeek moment for open source IDEs, instead of getting yourself locked into an IDE provided by OpenAI or Microsoft or wherever it might be. Tracy, I know you've been following this DevOps AI coding space for a while, but what's your take on what's going on here?
Well, I did help start the Eclipse Foundation back in 2004. I was one of their first board members. And this is something, this does not surprise me. They have been very, very good at pivoting. Anytime new technology it shows up or is on the horizon, building that platform to make it easier to use these tools has always been a priority to them. So yeah, this is, I hate to say it's more of the same, but it's more of the same of the Eclipse Foundation being able to pivot that IDE so that it can support new development practices. I don't know exactly what they call this AI platform, Thea, I believe. And the ability to really develop software without any kind of lock-in has always been what they've talked about. I think the only lock-in that they want is the IDE itself, but everything around the IDE should be pretty open. So, being able for developers to be able to continue using an IDE that they have known and loved for 20 years, and be able to start building and integrating LLMs into that model and that IDE, that's beautiful. So thank you, Eclipse Foundation, for doing that. And that team is an amazing team, and they have stayed relevant for a very long time. So kudos to them. That's what I think.
Yeah, I thought that the part of what Eclipse does is enable developers to create their own IDEs, though, or is that just a terminology?
In this case, you can do both, right? They have licensed the core code, so in a way that if you're a vendor and you want to create your own IDE based on their IDE framework, you can do that. Or even if you're an enterprise and you're that ambitious and you want to create your own IDE, you can do that. Or you can download what will be a more ready to use IDE provided by them.
Which is why the adoption is so strong and it's so sticky, right? That there used to be several different IDEs before the Eclipse Foundation came about. We talked about a lot of different IDEs, and now we talk about two, pretty much, Eclipse and Visual Studio. So they're staying frosty. They really are. They're starting to build in the features that developers need and provide a framework for developers to be able to build AI apps. And that's what they've always done.
And there is also a bunch of other tools that have come into the market, like Microsoft Origin, SlangChain. There is also Crew AI. They're all open source, and they are all supposed to help build agentic AI applications on them.
I've been told that a lot of those tools that have come into the market are essentially forks of VS Code, which is open source from Microsoft. And we seem to have tried this movement where we were heavily into open source for our IDEs. And then when the folks came along with all these AI platforms, they seem to like take a lot of open source code, wrap some proprietary code around it, and try to pull developers into their own little ecosystems. That seems like maybe a replay of a scenario that we saw play out over the course of a decade that's now happening much more rapidly. But I don't know, Tracy, are we past the days where vendors can lock in developers? It seems like it's a pointless effort.
I think it depends on what you're talking about, what developer tool you're talking about. I don't think we're past those days, though. No, I would not say that. I think the developers. I think what happens is that a culture is built, and an ecosystem is built around these developer tools, and that's what locks them in. I don't necessarily think that they have to stick with them, but I do believe that there is camps, right? There's the Eclipse camps, there's the VS camps, and I think we'll see that in these AI tools as well. And I think that the Eclipse Foundation is seeing that they should have a play in that. So no, we're not past that. I think that's going to continue. I think it's part of how developers work. I was going to say it's cultural, right? It's cultural, and I'm not kidding you. I used to carry around a little diskette in my briefcase. Well, we used to have a briefcase that had brief on it. I talk to developers to this day that don't want to do anything except VI, right? The hardcore, really command line types. So, that's a pretty heavy lock-in when you carry your own editor around in your briefcase, or I would stick it in my purse, so I always had it.
Yeah, we talk all the time about quote unquote religion in these, like, the religious it's cultural. It's really cultural, but this idea that each developer, and sometimes developer teams or groups within, like, cabals or something within the developer teams, have their preferred language, platform, etc. I don't think that. I mean, I don't think the VS versus Eclipse or whatever, that it extends to that. Although, Tracy, you would know better than me. But there's real passion around what the right way is to do all of these different elements. And my sense is that that it's more like VS and then everything else. It's more like Microsoft and then everything else. Microsoft has a very cohesive system in a lot of ways. I know I've talked to a number of customers recently about how they're developing, and even ones that are going, cloud first, open, whatever. If their management has a significant investment in Microsoft from whatever a productivity or an enterprise software standpoint, they wind up being Microsoft shops, and at development wise. So I think that what's really interesting here is, like you said, the quick moves, the swift pivot of this open source community to, let's say, embrace and adopt and enable the use of AI in an open and unsticky way, except for, like you say, the stickiness of that particular project.
Yeah, they started with they integrated Copilot pretty quickly. They didn't take much time to do that, for example.
Right. So long now. I mean, maybe this is just my perception, but I'd love to know what you think. Is the open source community catching up faster to these proprietary platforms? I mean, historically, we've always seen them kind of catch up and then eventually surpass the proprietary platform that they originally created some version of. But I feel like that's happening much faster in the age of AI.
Yeah, definitely. The drive for AI is propelling open source even forward. It has brought it front and center, especially for developers and people who are really involved with AI, the development of it. And open source going forward is going to play a bigger role than it does right now, because people are tired of proprietary technologies being expensive. And as you mentioned, the vendor lock-in is definitely an impediment there. And there are also certain data privacy concerns with proprietary technologies. And not to mention that open source offers a certain flexibility and transparency, which are highly coveted with AI development.
It has a cycle, though. Open source has a cycle. And if we go into a recession, open source will be king again. Right? Every time we have a boom and there's a lot of money in the sector, open source tends to be less adopted. And then when the economy starts slowing down, then open source becomes more adopted. So there is a cycle to it. So the tools that stick, like Jenkins, are the ones that they're like, okay, we've spent all this time building around. We're not going to change. We're not going to swap it out unless we really have a compelling reason to do so. And it's sort of the same with the developer IDE tools. You really have to have a compelling reason. And that compelling reason may be we are a Microsoft shop. And I do see, if they have been buying Microsoft tools and they paid for a subscription, you're going to use Visual Studio. But there are a lot of places they are Eclipse. They have been for a very long time, and they're using Eclipse, and they're oftentimes an IBM shop. So there you go.
It's an excellent point, Tracy, but I'm kind of wondering what's the consumption model for that open source, because there's direct use and then there's via a partner. I mean, the classic Red Hat example of using Linux, but you're paying Red Hat for management and support and all that other sort of stuff. The reason I ask is direct use of open source may go up in a recession, but there's still a cost. There's an investment in talent and capability and that sort of thing. And you either invest it directly with hiring and training, or you invest it indirectly through the partner model that I just mentioned. And I think there's a fair amount of enterprise level activity that doesn't do open source because they don't want to have that investment burden. What's your perspective on that?
So I think it's who the buyer is, right? When let's just, I'll take the space I know the most, development and DevOps. When you're at that level, you don't have budget authority. And your director might get money for you to buy additional tools, and you may have submitted for doing some, making these purchases. But if you don't get those funds, you're going to go out and you're going to start downloading open source tools, regardless of what you're at the higher level, what they say. Jenkins is a really good case study for open source, because Jenkins was out there getting implemented while other competing tools that were trying to do CI/CD had to go through this full process of being evaluated and having to be looked at by several different departments. There had to be a budget for it. And in the meantime, they implemented Jenkins, right? So open source gets adopted regardless of what upper management might want to think or do. Because of that particular fact. If you don't have the budget and you can find something that will work in the open source world, you're going to use it.
There is definitely a shadow DevOps phenomenon, but I also think that it's not too long before a project, if it gains traction, starts to benefit from that flywheel effect, where the number of contributors start to increase, the innovations happen faster, and the single vendor who has limitations in terms of the number of engineers they can hire eventually falls behind. And I think that's what we're seeing in Linux, and I think we've seen now in databases, and I think that whole scenario is going to play out in AI as well. But Guy, what do you think?
Oh yeah, Definitely. I think you're putting your finger on what was exciting to me about this particular news. I couldn't articulate it until you just said it, which is the force, power, capability of a collaborative community. I mean, open source is extremely well understood, how it works, how it should work, how to govern it, how to focus it, so to speak, while enabling all this creativity and everything. And now that I think about it, this is a terrific development in the incorporation and use of AI in coding, because so many eyes are going to be on it, and all of these dangers and problems and issues that we've been talking about for what seems like over a year now. This is one way to address them for sure. That's a really good point.
And Sulgana, I could be crazy about this particular point, but I feel like the mystery around AI is starting to fall away. And I think people are starting to understand how it works, and they're not as shocked and awed. And as that happens, more people are comfortable using it and contributing and being part of this community. So have we crossed some sort of AI Rubicon here, or are we about to?
Yeah, definitely AI is less mystifying to the people as it was even a couple of years back. People are starting to understand the way it works, how best to leverage it, and they're discovering new use cases, enterprise use cases, and how to implement it. It's obviously there is still work to be done, but yeah, I feel like people are definitely are crossing a threshold where they understand that AI can be valuable, and the certain ways that it can contribute to business. Yes.
All right. Tracy, last question on this particular topic. Do you think anybody on Wall Street is going to figure this out, and there might be some impact on valuations as people start to realize, hey, this AI stuff, it ain't that magical?
Well, I think that they should be worried about the Tesla valuation before the AI valuations. I'm sorry, that's like a 87 to 1, right? Their ratio is 87. That's just ridiculous. I don't know what what like ChatGPT is, but I believe that those valuations will increase as AI becomes more prevalent. And when you have these IDEs that are coming out to make it easier for developers to start using AI tools within their IDE, I think it's just going to push the AI industry, and I think that the AI companies are going to probably have higher valuations because of it. And there'll be more out there, and maybe fewer electric car companies. Maybe
All right,
one fewer. Anyway.
all right, folks, you heard it here. Keep your eyes on this open source space when it comes to AI, because it's going to do some amazing things in the next couple of years. So just wait,
Amen, brother. Amen.
just wait and see. We'll be back in a minute.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey, folks, we're back, and we're talking about the move by the Open Infrastructure Consortium, or Open Infra, who is the steward for OpenStack and a couple of other associated projects, is now going to become an arm of the Linux Foundation, which is the steward for, well, not just Linux, but Kubernetes. And of course, there's Cloud Native Computing Foundation as part of the Linux Foundation, as is the Cloud Foundry folks. So, if you look at the Linux Foundation, it's an amalgamation of foundations, as you might say. But one of the interesting things about all this is that it seems to put the OpenStack community maybe a little more closely aligned to where the maintainers are of Kubernetes and Linux itself. And so when you look at this, Sulgana, do you think we might see a resurgence of OpenStack? Is something going on here? Or is this the early stages of it? Or is this just another move to save some cash?
OpenStack is in fact experiencing a resurgence right now because of Broadcom acquiring VMware and then revising the pricing strategy. So now once again people are out looking for open source options. So that caused OpenStack to have a sort of like a, should I call it a resuscitation of sorts, and now that OpenStack projects are going to likely be a part of the Linux Foundation, and it will live more closely with Linux, Kubernetes, and OpenStack. And even with the when Kubernetes became a huge success, even then it sidelined OpenStack for a while. So I think living closely with all the other big foundations, like you said, Kubernetes, then there's CNCF, PyTorch, OpenSearch, it'll definitely help bring it back to the front and center of open source. Yes.
Tracy, are you seeing any more OpenStack out there as of late?
I think it has a defined audience. I'm not sure it's growing, but I'm not in the platform engineering space too much, so I can't tell you if that's true or not. But I can tell you that this doesn't surprise me, this this kind of new partnership, because it takes a lot of work to manage an open source foundation. It's there's a lot of governance, there's a lot of tooling that has to be done on the backside to make sure that developers are trusted, CLAs, and it's work. It's a ton of work. I don't think we would have ever pursued an open source project independent of something like the Apache or the Linux Foundation. So but the one thing I can say, and it's wrong to assume that because it's moves over to the Linux Foundation, that new open source contributors will join the team. And sometimes as these tools, I don't know how old OpenStack is, but it's got to be 10, 15 years. I'm not sure.
It's
15, I think.
Roughly, yeah, 15.
Yeah.
Very
So
Yeah, Rackspace originated it.
so you get a lot of people stop contributing to older projects that tend to be slowing down, right? And so if
think
they
a lot
believe that
of
they're
the-
going to get more contributors, they're wrong.
Well, that may totally be true. A lot of the continuing development of OpenStack has been, from what I can tell, hidden from the wider community. OpenStack at one time was the open source rival to Azure Stack, but eventually Azure Pack, Azure Stack. So the Azure approach, the VMware approach, these enterprise approaches. Not to mention, that was pre-Outpost. Before public cloud vendors started to provide on-prem options. So I'm probably forgetting a major platform, but Microsoft and VMware were the main ones. I would say around 2018, 2017, it underwent a marketing and a positioning shift, and it became, so what happened was more or less private enterprise, to a large degree, went with, sort of turned their backs on an open source approach to a cloud stack, and instead started to use VMware, the predecessors to VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, or more typically Microsoft. So for on-prem clouds, such as they were doing, the implementations just weren't large enough. The technical needs were a little high. There were a few vendors, like Mirantis is the main one I remember, that sort of took the Red Hat role for OpenStack and enabled OpenStack. They had to shift. So that market went away. But what market stayed? The market that stayed was public, but to a greater degree, the telcos. And the telcos have very large cloud implementations, where they are extremely technical. They have very high performance needs, extreme low latency, extremely high availability, all those sorts of things, where having an open platform that they could use and fuss with and everything was really important. I don't entirely know how to interpret this move. I think you have it nailed, probably, Tracy, which is running an open source project is hard, There has been no real vendor side, like IT vendor sponsor, since Rackspace stepped sort of down and away from OpenStack. None of the telcos are really going to do it. They're rivals anyway. So in the end, this is probably smart from a, like you say, a management, governance, tooling point of view. And they can all continue to contribute, and it may just be a little bit less public and obvious. I don't think this signals some kind of, new adoption of OpenStack at all.
No, I don't think so either, but it will help them. Like you said, the telcos, if the telcos become, premier members of that new foundation and they're on the boards, then they can work together to move, OpenStack in a direction that works for them as a consortium. And the Linux Foundation is a perfect place to do that.
All right. I'm going to argue the opposite of that. And here's the three things that I think are going to change that equation. One is, originally, to Guy's point, yes, the enterprise turned away from OpenStack because it was hard, it was complicated, and it wasn't as easy to manage as VMware. But to Sulgana's point, VMware pricing's up and people are looking for alternatives, and OpenStack's gotten easier to manage from the various distributions that are out there. The second thing is the AI community is looking for ways to maximize utilization rates of GPUs. And one way to do that is to have some sort of framework for managing their usage, whether they're on-premise or in the cloud. And they're not going to pay for commercial licenses to manage that stuff at the scale that they do. So they're going to go look for something that's open source. And then finally, there is this whole movement towards data sovereignty, and that's pushing, I wouldn't call it a major trend just yet, but there's a lot of repatriation of workloads around two factors. One is the cost of running them in the cloud. And the second one is a lot of organizations are getting pushed to run more workloads and keep those data that they have in some sort of either VPC that's in a specific geographic region, or, heaven forbid, an old-fashioned on-premise data center that they run and manage. So I think there's upside here for OpenStack, but what remains to be seen, and I could be crazy.
I think
you're crazy.
So here's the thing. There is real potential in vendors that specialize in edge computing in one form or another to utilize this. I could see that. The repatriation, in other words, when we're thinking on a sort of, let's say, a cluster level deployment for an enterprise in the scenario you're describing, which is an increasingly common scenario. They want to bring the compute to the data, and they want to have control over the data, and especially sort of, let's say, its movement or what have you. That all makes sense. I think that a great deal of that is going to be solved using, on-prem and colo outposts without a capital O of public cloud. Microsoft already, this is a huge part of their business model, frankly, but Oracle is getting into this game as well. So that you get, there's this sort of enterprise managed answer to that repatriation problem. Now, is that a lock-in type of scenario? Yes, it is. But we just circle back around to the original reason for OpenStack, pulling back from, general enterprise adoption and use, which is it's just a really complicated thing to deploy, run, and participate in. And that doesn't change, Mike. So that, I think, is a more governing force, and therefore you're crazy.
Ditto, Guy, ditto.
Call me crazy. Come on, take it.
No, I agree completely with what Guy just said. We both said you're crazy at the same time. So
an edge vendor is still providing. It's just not lock in into a cloud stack, right? It's not lock in into. They can do all the things. They can provide turnkey or what's usually called transparent, but frankly is opaque integration. So integration you don't have to worry about or see or manage back to all three of the biggies and other clouds and all that other sort of stuff. The proverbial slide in, switch it on, stack. I mean, Kodiak, who is it? There's a great vendor out on the West Coast. I'm gonna remember their name too late, that does this sort of thing. And they can, all those folks can run OpenStack and invest in OpenStack and be part of the OpenStack community, and the end customer there doesn't really need to concern themselves with it. Oxide computing is the one I'm thinking of. So that is possible. And I think there probably will be some edge companies that take that approach, but it's not going to be so significant from a market standpoint.
All right.
Yeah.
Guy and Tracy are beating me up. Can you help me out here or no?
Well, I'm with you on the fact that yeah, the OpenStack ecosystem itself has like sort of come back into focus since, especially with the telco companies in the recent years, especially driven by VMware's price increases, and yeah, definitely. It may not necessarily become the thing, or it's not probably gonna be gonna catapult in a significant way that would um, get sideline other solutions that are out there. But yes, open source is not easy. It is a lot of work. But I still believe that it is sort of coming into the limelight once again, and people are looking for alternatives, and either it's driven by cost concerns or data privacy. It is definitely going to be more in prominence, especially with AI being in the mix.
All right. Well, hopefully somebody will come along and make OpenStack even easier than it has been of late. Hey, I can see a world where maybe those AI agents are making OpenStack easier to deploy and manage. So who knows? We'll see what happens. But
Just keep
I
getting
think-
crazier and crazier, Mike. Come on.
It's not. It's possible. I mean,
I don't know. Would that be the open question? Would that be a good thing? Do we care to make OpenStack easier? I mean, I love OpenStack. I help build and market solutions based on OpenStack, and I loved working with those engineers and product managers.
it would certainly help some small companies if OpenStack were easier to implement.
It definitely would. Yeah, it
So
definitely would.
let me come halfway to Mike. Let's say this. Let's say that AWS and Google and these cloud providers continue not to help us manage our costs, right? We've talked about that before on the gang, the hidden costs and how hard it is to manage those costs, be able to figure out what director, is using the funds. And more companies start going to privatizing their environment. Then I'll give OpenStack some breathing room, because that would probably be the tool that most people would use if they are not going to an alternative. But I think at this point, the cat's out of the bag, and most companies are going to use an alternative like AWS or Azure or Google Cloud. And then it's not even a question for them. As Guy pointed out, they're not having to deal with their own, persistent storage of, for VMs, for example. Right. So they don't even have to think about it anymore. And that's kind of the point.
All right. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead because I'm only half as crazy as I was 2 minutes ago. So that's
Wait, I have something more to. No, go ahead.
all right. Folks, we'll be back in a minute.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, folks, we're back and we're going to be talking about, there's a big conversation going on in Irish circles these days. And full disclosure, that's Michael Patrick Vizard to you. So you know where I might be coming from on this particular topic. But The president had the Taoiseach of Ireland over. Taoiseach is Gaelic for chief, which is their equivalent of a prime minister, and berated him along with the rest of Europe for quote unquote stealing U.S. companies, and specifically citing pharmaceutical companies, but tech companies are also in there. There's a lot of European operations for U.S. companies where they store their tax dollars. There was a famous case involving Apple, and there's some disagreement about the EU wanted the Irish government to collect more taxes and actually force them to collect something like, I don't know, 1.4 billion or some big number like that. But the point is some people are saying that Ireland is a tax haven. The Irish respectfully disagree. They're just offering advantage taxes that are at a lower rate, and it's actually U.S. law that enables all these companies to set up these operations in Ireland or elsewhere, and it's not their fault. They say if you want to fix it, you got to fix it on the U.S. side. This has been going on for a while. Accenture, I don't know if you know this guy, but the worldwide headquarters for Accenture is in Dublin, and they have like
the worldwide headquarters for Dell Technologies, where I used to work, is or was quite some time in Dublin as well.
The European headquarters is over there, along with Google and everybody else who's got a U.S. operation or U.S. company. And then what they do is they keep the revenue from Europe there, and they don't repatriate that back to the U.S., so it's not subject to U.S. taxes. And this is an ongoing conversation. Now, the Irish have benefited from all of this because there's now a reasonably thriving software ecosystem of Irish companies. There's at least couple of hundred out there. They're small, but they're fledgling. But what's your take on all this, Guy? Are we going to see the U.S. kind of try to essentially put the screws to the Irish here on St. Patrick's Day? What's going on?
Maybe not on St. Patrick's Day. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe we'll just announce it today and do it tomorrow. The U.S. administration seems to be intent on putting the screws on everybody. So sure, I could see that happening. And depending on the reaction from, let's say, the markets or something like that, or with the specific companies, I could see them withdrawing any screws that they put to the Irish or the EU with this approach. I have three reactions to this. The first one is tax haven or no tax haven. That's kind of a semantic discussion. Ireland had has three terrific advantages, one of which was a more favorable tax policy to corporations there, and the lack of a requirement, as you say, to unlike U.S. citizens who have to report their personal global income, companies who are based out of the United States do not need to do the same. So they didn't need to report revenues and profits from Europe or anywhere else in the world outside of the United States. So that was one advantage. The second advantage was at the time that a lot of this investment started, the overall Irish economy and I don't remember the economic terms for this, but the labor and the various costs were fairly lower than certainly the rest of Europe and less than Canada and the United States. So you get sort of more bang for your buck in investment there, whether it was hiring or building or renting office buildings or any of that other sort of things. So that was the second advantage. And the third advantage was a highly educated pool of, a potential workforce. And Ireland very rapidly became one of the world leaders, particularly in software development, I think, but also in other areas of tech development, as well as in pharma and other sectors. So it had all those advantages. And the capitalist system we work in, those advantages are going to attract investment, but also because of the first reason, companies went over there. So if Trump is blaming them for companies being over there and paying taxes over there and not paying them here, blame the Irish, that is, guilty as charged. And we should be proud of that. I'm not Irish, but I'm proud of it for the Irish and for you, Tracy, for Sulgana, and for everybody else who loves Ireland. My second and third reactions are pretty simple. The second reaction is, our own domestic policy right now, doing, for example, threatening the CHIPS Act that it was intended to bring a lot of investment onshore and capability onshore in the United States, threatening to bring it to an end one way or another. That's going to push business and work overseas. So we're doing lots of things like that right now. It has nothing to do whether it's Ireland or China or anybody else. So we are making other places attractive to build and sustain business. And the third reaction is I never really know on what the current administration means or doesn't mean. Is it messaging? Is it it all has strategy and policy implications, but to say that there's a policy going on here and to make predictions about what the outcomes are going to be, it seems to me be a fool's errand, at least at this stage. Maybe later this year or next year or something, things will solidify, but right now things are changing too much. So I wouldn't make any bets one way or the other right now. In fact, I think like a lot of folks in the market right now, I feel like we just sort of need to retreat and protect ourselves.
Yeah, Trump. Yeah, Trump himself once said, he was asked, something about the fact that he really didn't pay any taxes, and he said, "That's because I'm smart," right? So smart people are just taking advantage of these tax laws, and they go between countries and states, right? States do this. There's been counties who have said, we're going to charge a less tax in our county if you open up a business here. I am sure that Donald Trump himself have gotten tax breaks from, Chicago and New York when he built properties there. So he knows this game and he understands it. And as Guy has pointed out, why is he just not playing the game? Why penalize anybody for playing the game? Why doesn't he just play the game better? And we already have some, budgeted policies put in place to better play the game, like the CHIPS Act, and he doesn't want to pursue it. So I find it very frustrating. I really do. And, maybe Ireland's a good place for deploy of.
But to Guy's point,
That's
the
a threat.
U.S. tax code's a mess. I mean, that's
What
why
was
there
that?
is a game. There's a game in the first place because the U.S. tax code is a mess. So why don't we just fix the tax code and then all these other issues will take care of themselves? But we don't seem to have any political will to do that, Guy.
No, we don't. I will not comment on that. That's blindingly obvious.
So we'll just keep playing this game forever because nobody wants to address the core issue. Sulgana, let me ask you something. Do you think that the U.S. is becoming less attractive place for IT professionals to want to come to work from around the globe, right? There's been a history of people come here to go to college and they get educated, and a fair number of them stay and take jobs and generate a lot of taxable income. But I feel like, more and more of those folks are coming to college and going home right after.
Right. There's been a lot of tightening of regulations around student visas, what they can or cannot do, or if they can switch over to another kind of visa that would allow them to work in the United States. So that has definitely dampened the enthusiasm anywhere in the world in students who have formerly wanted to come to the US, study in an US university, and then eventually find work here and make a life for themselves. Um, so it's coming back to the Ireland discussion. It's really not Ireland. It's the same reason anywhere in the world companies have set up shops. Yes, Ireland has the lowest corporate tax rates, and then it has easy availability of highly skilled workers. It's same with China or India, because for years companies have set up bases in those parts of the world where there's easy availability of talent and the cost is cheaper. And so yeah, I feel like there would be as much as the attempt is to bring back business to the US soil, I think the US would benefit if they fix their tax regulations in such a way so that companies find a reason to set up shop here as opposed to going offshore. And definitely right now, the thing that is happening with all the visas and stuff, it's definitely giving people less and less reason to come in.
And less reason to invest here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Chaos, the disruption and chaos and the not knowing is in the future. If we keep up this pace in the next 4 years, we won't have a lot of new investment coming from outside of the U.S.
There's a lack of certainty, which is also one of the things that's discouraging a lot of people to really turn to the US as a favorable place to put their money in right now.
And meanwhile, if you look over in places like Ireland, they have many, many, many more job openings than they have ability to fill them. So you might see a lot of folks stopping to go work there.
And if I can put a rosy spin on all of this, or the silver lining, if you like, which is really unusual for me. I don't know why I'm doing it. The supply chain problems we experienced during the pandemic that caused this sort of anti-globalization set of policies and politics too, actually, or at least accelerated those, don't apply quite as much to the digital economy, if at all. Certainly, you need physical cables underneath the ocean to take the Irish work product in software, in the software sector, just to take a simple example. So you need something, but you don't need shipping. You don't need things that are as vulnerable to, not invulnerable, but as vulnerable to things, global disruptions like the pandemic had on global shipping and so forth. So the point is this allows U.S. companies and U.S. organizations and U.S. individuals, even if the investment is not happening here in the U.S., we can still take advantage of that work product, except for one thing, of course, which is tariffs, which just makes me exhausted to even say the word. But I think the tariff scheme, again, we'll know in a year where that's really going to shake out. But my point is that, I think, Sulgana, you're perfectly right about sort of the dangers within the U.S. for vendors, producers of this same kind of service and product. But the consumers of it in the United States are probably going to be able to take advantage, and that's a good thing.
All right, folks. Back in the 80s, the Irish government used to run ads in publications like Business Week, and they would have these pictures of these newly minted graduate students in their gowns, and then the copy underneath it said, "Hire the Irish before they hire you." Well, here we are. Folks, I want to thank you all for being on the show. Guy, thanks for your insights. Sulgana, good to see you as always. Tracy, I don't know about you, but in about 30 minutes, I'm going to be marching up Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, so I'll see you later.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Enjoy your Irish day.
All right. And as they say in Ireland, Slang go full, which is Gaelic for goodbye until we see you again. Thanks for watching.